Welcome to our channel. Today we delve into one of the most chilling and unsolved mysteries that has haunted a small town for decades. This is the story of the brutal murder of the Wiese family, a case that remains shrouded in darkness and unanswered questions. Picture a quiet, close-knit community where everyone knows each other, where the most significant events are local fairs and school football games. Now imagine the shockwaves that rippled through this peaceful town when an entire family was found murdered in their own home. In this video, we will piece together the fragments of this horrific event, explore the possible motives, and examine the evidence that has baffled investigators for years. Before we delve into the harrowing details of the Wiese family murder, it's essential to understand who they were. The Wiese family was the embodiment of the American dream in a small town. John Wiese, the father, was a respected lawyer known for his integrity and dedication. His wife, Laura, was a beloved teacher at the local elementary school, often described as the heart of the community. They had two children, Emily, a bright and cheerful 10-year-old, and Michael, a curious and adventurous 8-year-old. The Wiese family lived in a charming 2-story house on Oak Street, a home that radiated warmth and happiness. John and Laura were actively involved in community events, from organizing charity drives to coaching Little League games. Emily and Michael were well liked by their peers, often seen riding their bikes around the neighborhood or playing in the local park. To the outside world, they were the perfect family, free from any apparent troubles or conflicts. But as we know, appearances can be deceiving. The Wiese family had their share of challenges, like any other family. John was working on a high-profile case that many believed could have made him some enemies. Laura had recently been dealing with a difficult student, whose parents were less than cooperative, and while the children seemed happy, there were whispers of bullying incidents at school. Despite these pressures, the Wiese family remained close-knit, supporting each other through thick and thin. They were known for their Friday night movie marathons, Sunday family dinners, and summer camping trips. Their love for each other was evident to anyone who knew them, making the tragedy that struck all the more incomprehensible. As we move forward in this investigation, keep in mind the lives that were lost, the dreams, the aspirations, and the love that was brutally taken away. The Wiese family was not just a headline. They were real people with real lives, torn apart by an act of unimaginable violence. The question that remains is, who could have done this, and why? In the early hours of September 25th, 1999, the small town was jolted awake by a call that would change everything. It was Laura's colleague from the school, concerned that she hadn't shown up for work and hadn't called in. This was highly unusual for someone as dependable as Laura. After multiple failed attempts to reach the family by phone, the colleague decided to drive over to the Wiese residence. What she found was a scene out of a nightmare. The front door, usually welcoming, was eerily ajar. The house, often filled with the sounds of children playing and family chatter, was hauntingly silent. With a growing sense of dread, she stepped inside. The living room was in disarray, a stark contrast to its usual tidiness. Furniture was overturned, and there were clear signs of a struggle. As she moved further into the house, the true horror revealed itself. The lifeless bodies of John and Laura Wiese were found in the kitchen, their expressions frozen in terror. Upstairs, the children, Emily and Michael, were discovered in their bedrooms, their lives brutally cut short. The colleagues' screams echoed through the house, alerting neighbors and summoning the authorities. Detectives and forensic teams arrived quickly, but the scene that greeted them was one of chaos and confusion. Blood spattered the walls, and the air was thick with the metallic scent of violence. However, the most chilling detail was the lack of forced entry. The doors and windows were locked from the inside, suggesting that the perpetrator had been someone the family knew and trusted. As investigators combed through the house, they found more unsettling clues. There were no signs of robbery. Valuable items were left untouched. The family's personal belongings were undisturbed, indicating that the motive was something far more sinister than theft. The killer had left no fingerprints, no DNA, no trace of their presence, as if they had vanished into thin air. Neighbors gathered outside, their faces pale with shock and disbelief. This was a town where everyone knew everyone, where children played freely in the streets, and doors were left unlocked. The discovery of the Wiese family's murder shattered that sense of security, leaving the community reeling. The crime scene was meticulously documented, but every piece of evidence seemed to lead to more questions rather than answers. Who could have committed such a heinous act? And why? The locked doors and windows added an extra layer of mystery, making it seem as if the killer had simply disappeared without a trace. As the sun rose, casting a grim light on the Wiese family home, one thing was clear. This was no ordinary crime. It was a calculated, cold-blooded act that left an indelible mark on the town. The discovery of the crime scene was just the beginning of a long and arduous investigation, one that would leave more questions than answers and haunt the community for years to come. As the sun rose over the Wiese family home, casting an eerie light on the aftermath of the night's horrors, the small town's police force was joined by state investigators. The crime scene was sealed off, and the arduous task of piecing together what had happened began. The first step was to establish a timeline. When was the family last seen alive? Who had they interacted with in the days leading up to the murders? The detectives worked tirelessly, interviewing neighbors, friends, and colleagues. The investigators quickly realized that this was no ordinary case. The lack of forced entry suggested that the killer was someone the family knew and trusted. This chilling possibility meant that everyone was a suspect, and the town's sense of security was further eroded. Every resident, every friend, every acquaintance was scrutinized under the harsh light of suspicion. Forensic teams meticulously combed through the house, looking for any clue that could lead them to the perpetrator. Blood spatter analysis, fingerprint dusting, and DNA collection were carried out with painstaking precision, but the results were frustratingly inconclusive. The killer had been careful, almost preternaturally so, leaving behind no traceable evidence. A lead finally emerged when a neighbor recalled seeing a suspicious vehicle parked near the Wiese home on the night of the murders. The description was vague, but it was enough to warrant further investigation. The police issued a public appeal for information, hoping that someone might have seen something that could break the case wide open. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation grew increasingly desperate. The town was gripped by fear and paranoia. Rumors spread like wildfire, each more outlandish than the last. Some believed it was the work of a wandering drifter, while others whispered of a hidden vendetta against the Wiese family. But without concrete evidence, these theories remained just that, speculation. Despite the lack of progress, the investigators refused to give up. They knew that solving this case was not just about bringing a killer to justice. It was about restoring a shattered community's sense of safety and trust. The Wiese family's murder had cast a long shadow over the town, and the only way to lift it was to find the truth. As the days turned into months, the initial flurry of activity slowed, but the investigators remained vigilant. They continued to re-examine the evidence, hoping that a fresh perspective might reveal something they had missed. The case file grew thicker, filled with interviews, forensic reports, and leads that went nowhere. The investigation had become a race against time. The longer it took to find the killer, the harder it would be to solve the case. Memories fade, evidence degrades, and the trail grows colder with each passing day. But despite these challenges, the investigators remained resolute. They owed it to the Wiese family and to the town to uncover the truth. As the investigation into the Wiese family murders dragged on, hope seemed to dwindle with each passing day. The community was desperate for answers, and the investigators were under immense pressure to solve the case. Just when it seemed like the trail had gone completely cold, a series of key breakthroughs reignited the investigation. The first significant piece of evidence came from an unexpected source, a local dog walker. While taking her usual route near the Wiese home, she stumbled upon a discarded item partially buried in the underbrush, a blood-stained glove. The glove was immediately sent to the forensic lab for analysis, and the results were promising. The blood on the glove matched that of one of the Wiese family members. But more importantly, it contained traces of another, unidentified individual's DNA. This was the first concrete piece of evidence suggesting the presence of another person at the crime scene. The second breakthrough came from a deep dive into the Wiese family's financial records. Investigators discovered a series of large, unexplained transactions made in the months leading up to the murders. These transactions were traced back to an offshore account, raising suspicions of potential blackmail or extortion. Could these financial irregularities provide a motive for the murders? The investigators began to explore this new avenue, hoping it would lead them closer to the truth. Next, a forensic re-examination of the crime scene revealed a small, almost imperceptible piece of fabric caught in a door hinge. This fabric was sent for analysis and was found to be a match for a rare type of clothing material, typically used in high-end custom-made suits. This clue suggested that the killer might have been someone with significant financial means or connections, adding another layer of complexity to the case. In addition to these tangible pieces of evidence, a new witness came forward. A former colleague of Mr. Wiese revealed that he had been acting strangely in the weeks before the murders, frequently looking over his shoulder and appearing anxious. This colleague also mentioned overhearing a heated phone conversation where Mr. Wiese had warned someone to stay away from my family. This testimony added weight to the theory that the Wiese family had been targeted. These breakthroughs collectively painted a picture of a complex, premeditated crime. The investigators now had multiple leads to follow: the unidentified DNA, the suspicious financial transactions, the rare fabric, and the new witness testimony. Each piece of evidence brought them one step closer to solving the mystery that had gripped the town. Despite these promising developments, the case was far from closed. The investigators knew that they needed more concrete evidence to secure a conviction. They continued to work tirelessly, re-interviewing witnesses, following up on leads, and scrutinizing every detail. The community, once paralyzed by fear, began to feel a glimmer of hope that justice might finally be within reach. As the investigation into the Wiese family murders picked up steam, the focus shifted to identifying potential suspects and exploring various theories that could explain the tragic event. The small town buzzed with speculation, each theory more chilling than the last. Here, we delve into the most compelling suspects and theories that emerged during the investigation. The first suspect was a local handyman who had done some repair work at the Wiese home shortly before the murders. Known for his volatile temper and shady past, he quickly became a person of interest. Investigators found it suspicious that he had suddenly left town on the night of the murders, but despite extensive questioning, no concrete evidence linked him to the crime. Another theory pointed to a business associate of Mr. Wiese. This man had a history of financial disputes and had been involved in several heated arguments with Mr. Wiese in the months leading up to the murders. The unexplained financial transactions uncovered during the investigation seemed to support this theory. However, when questioned, he provided a solid alibi, which placed him out of town during the time of the murders. A third theory revolved around a possible connection to organized crime. The rare fabric found at the crime scene suggested that the killer might have been someone with significant financial means. This led investigators to consider the possibility that Mr. Wiese had somehow crossed paths with a dangerous criminal organization. This theory gained traction when a former colleague revealed that Mr. Wiese had been unusually paranoid and anxious in the weeks before the murders. As investigators delved deeper, they also considered the possibility of a personal vendetta. The new witness testimony about Mr. Wiese's heated phone conversation added weight to this theory. Could someone have harbored a grudge against the Wiese family so intense that it led to their brutal demise? Despite these leads, none of the theories provided a definitive answer. Each potential suspect had an alibi or lacked sufficient evidence to be charged. The investigation remained a tangled web of unanswered questions and chilling possibilities. The town was left to grapple with the unsettling realization that the killer could be someone they knew and trusted. Theories continued to circulate, but the truth remained elusive. The Wiese family murders were a haunting reminder of the darkness that could lurk in even the most seemingly idyllic communities. The Wiese family tragedy not only left a void in their home, but also cast a long shadow over the entire community. The once serene and trusting small town was now gripped by fear and suspicion. Neighbors who once greeted each other with warm smiles now exchanged wary glances, their sense of security shattered. The local schools saw a significant drop in attendance as parents, terrified for their children's safety, opted for homeschooling or moved to neighboring towns. The playgrounds that were once filled with the sound of children's laughter now lay eerily silent, a stark contrast to the vibrant community life that once thrived. Local businesses suffered too. The small-town charm that had once attracted visitors now seemed tainted by the dark cloud of the unsolved murders. Stores and restaurants saw a decline in customers, and the economy of the town took a noticeable hit. The annual town fair, a beloved tradition, was canceled for the first time in decades, a somber acknowledgement of the collective grief and fear that had taken hold. The town's law enforcement, once trusted and respected, now faced mounting pressure and criticism. Residents questioned their ability to keep them safe and demanded answers that were not forthcoming. The police station, usually a place of order and authority, became a focal point of frustration and anger. Vigils and memorials were held in honor of the Wiese family, with the community coming together to mourn and remember. Candles were lit, and flowers were laid at the doorstep of their now abandoned home, a poignant tribute to the family that had been so brutally taken from them. These gatherings were not just acts of mourning, but also of solidarity, a way for the community to unite in their shared grief and determination to find justice. Yet, the question remained: who could have committed such a heinous act? The uncertainty gnawed at the townspeople, leading to rampant speculation and the spreading of rumors. Friendships were strained, and long-standing relationships were tested as everyone became a suspect in each other's eyes. The psychological impact on the community was profound. Therapists and counselors reported an increase in cases of anxiety, depression, and PTSD among residents. The children, in particular, struggled to comprehend the loss and the fear that now permeated their everyday lives. Nightmares and sleep disturbances became common, and the innocence of childhood was forever marred by the brutal reality of the murders. Despite the passage of time, the wound inflicted on the community by the Wiese family murders has never fully healed. The town carries on, but the memory of that fateful night lingers, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can descend upon even the most peaceful of places. As we move towards the conclusion of this tragic tale, we reflect on the lasting impact of the Wiese family murders on this small town. The scars may fade, but the memory endures, a testament to the fragility of life and the resilience of a community forever changed. The media descended upon the small town like vultures to a carcass. The Wiese family murders became headline news, thrusting the once quiet community into the national spotlight. News vans lined the streets, and journalists scrambled for any piece of information, any soundbite that could add drama to the already sensational story. Reporters stood in front of the Wiese home, their voices filled with a mix of shock and intrigue as they recounted the grisly details. The flashing cameras and bright lights contrasted starkly with the dark, somber mood that hung over the town. For the residents, it felt like their grief and fear were being exploited for ratings. Their personal tragedy turned into a spectacle for the world to see. The media frenzy only intensified the community's sense of unease. Rumors and speculations spread like wildfire, fueled by the constant news coverage. Theories ranged from a random act of violence to an inside job, each more sensational than the last. Talk show hosts and true crime podcasts picked up the story, dissecting every detail and interviewing anyone who claimed to have information. The public reaction was swift and varied. Some viewers were horrified and empathetic, sending messages of support and condolences to the town. Others were drawn in by the mystery, eager to play armchair detective and solve the case from the comfort of their homes. The internet became a breeding ground for theories and accusations, with amateur sleuths poring over every piece of information available. The pressure on local law enforcement increased tenfold. The police chief held press conferences, promising that they were doing everything in their power to solve the case. But the lack of progress only fueled public frustration and suspicion. Online forums buzzed with criticism, questioning the competence of the investigators and suggesting that a cover-up might be at play. Despite the media circus, the town tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the constant presence of cameras and reporters made it impossible to forget the horror that had unfolded. Children were shielded from the news, but whispers and snippets of conversation inevitably reached their ears, adding to their confusion and fear. The Wiese family became more than just victims. They became symbols of a mystery that captivated the nation. Their photos were plastered on TV screens and magazine covers, their names spoken with a mix of reverence and curiosity. The media's relentless coverage ensured that the story would not fade from public consciousness, keeping the memory of the tragedy alive, but also preventing the community from moving on. As the spotlight eventually dimmed and the news cycle moved on to the next big story, the town was left to pick up the pieces. The media had come and gone, leaving behind a community forever altered by the intrusion. The Wiese family murders remained unsolved, the unanswered questions lingering in the minds of those who had been touched by the tragedy. In the end, the media coverage and public reaction became another layer of complexity in an already bewildering case. The attention brought both scrutiny and support, but it also served as a constant reminder of the horror that had taken place. As the town continued to grapple with its grief and fear, the story of the Wiese family remained a haunting chapter in its history, a dark tale that refused to be forgotten. As the years have gone by, the unanswered questions surrounding the Wiese family murders have only grown more perplexing. Despite the efforts of investigators, many critical aspects of the case remain shrouded in mystery. How did the killer gain access to the house? Why was the family targeted? And most haunting of all, who could have committed such a brutal crime and vanished without a trace? In recent years, there have been several developments that have reignited interest in the case. Advances in forensic technology have allowed for a re-examination of the evidence. DNA samples that were once deemed inconclusive are being retested with more sophisticated methods, offering a glimmer of hope that new leads might emerge. Cold case units have taken a fresh look at the files, hoping that a new perspective might uncover something that was previously overlooked. One of the most intriguing developments came from an unexpected source, a series of anonymous tips that were submitted to a local news station. These tips suggested connections to individuals who had previously been overlooked by the investigation. While none of these leads have yet resulted in a breakthrough, they have provided new avenues for detectives to explore. The community has also played a role in keeping the case alive. Local residents have organized memorials and vigils to honor the Wiese family, ensuring that their story is not forgotten. Social media campaigns have brought renewed attention to the case, with hashtags like Justice for Wiese Family trending periodically. These efforts have not only kept the memory of the family alive, but have also put pressure on law enforcement to continue their pursuit of justice. Despite these efforts, the case remains unsolved. The lack of definitive answers has left a void that is felt by both the community and the investigators who have dedicated countless hours to finding the truth. For the Wiese family, justice remains elusive, and the town continues to grapple with the uncertainty and fear that the unsolved crime has left in its wake. As we look to the future, there is a cautious optimism that advances in technology and renewed public interest might finally bring closure to this haunting case. Until then, the mystery of the Wiese family murders remains a dark enigma, a puzzle that continues to challenge and confound those who seek to unravel it. As we reach the end of our journey through the tragic and haunting story of the Wiese family, we are left with more questions than answers. The brutal murders that shattered this small town remain a dark enigma, an unsolved puzzle that continues to haunt everyone who has come into contact with the case. The unanswered questions linger like shadows. How could such a horrific act go unnoticed in a close-knit community? What drove someone to commit such a heinous crime? And most importantly, who was responsible for taking the lives of an innocent family and robbing a community of its sense of security? The advances in forensic technology and the renewed interest in the case offer a glimmer of hope, but they also remind us of the limitations and complexities of solving such a deeply rooted mystery. The anonymous tips, the social media campaigns, and the cold case units all point to a community and a world that refuses to forget, that demands justice for the Wiese family. In reflecting on this case, we are reminded of the fragility of life and the darkness that can lurk behind the most ordinary of facades. The Wiese family, once a symbol of love and happiness, now represents a cautionary tale of how quickly and inexplicably that can all be taken away. As we close this chapter, let us not forget the impact this tragedy has had on the town and its residents. The Wiese family may be gone, but their memory lives on, a haunting reminder of a night that changed everything. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope that by shedding light on this dark chapter, we can keep the memory of the Wiese family alive and continue to seek the justice they so rightly deserve. Stay tuned for more stories that delve into the mysteries of our world, reminding us that even in the darkest of times, the search for truth and justice continues.